Cenat recently did something that almost never happens in streaming culture. He stepped away, he talked openly about burnout, mental health, and the need to disconnect from work and social media. And for once, the internet didn't immediately turn it into a joke. People understood it. Because burnout at that level isn't funny, it's real. But while Kai was gone, something uncomfortable became clear. The chaos didn't stop. If anything, it got louder. And that raises a question people are avoiding. What if Kai's biggest source of stress isn't the internet, but the environment he's surrounded by? Burnout doesn't happen in isolation. It's not just about working too hard or streaming too much. Burnout is environmental. It comes from constantly managing other people's problems, constantly being the responsible one, constantly feeling like you're carrying more than your share of the weight. When you're the biggest name in the room, every mistake made around you becomes your responsibility by default, even when you're not present. And that's exactly what happened here. While Kai stepped back to protect his peace, his name never really left the conversation. His friends continued to create situations, controversies, and moments that pulled him back into the spotlight without his consent. That alone is draining, because rest doesn't work if the mess keeps piling up while you're gone. There's a narrative people like to repeat about Kai, that he's the good one, that he's surrounded by people who bring him down, that he just needs to separate himself from the chaos. But narratives like that oversimplify things, because environments don't form randomly, patterns don't repeat by accident. Eventually you have to stop asking why chaos follows someone, and start asking why it's allowed to stay. Let's talk about Rakai. Rakai is young, and that matters. Youth deserves patience, but youth also requires guidance, structure, and accountability. What it doesn't need is unchecked validation. What we're watching in real time is a young creator being rewarded for his worst impulses. Aggression gets laughs, disrespect gets attention, recklessness gets engagement, and every time that behavior is rewarded, through donations, hype, or proximity to bigger names, it gets reinforced. That's not mentorship, that's conditioning. It teaches a dangerous lesson, that being loud matters more than being thoughtful, that being disruptive matters more than being decent, and that consequences are optional as long as the numbers look good. Even if Kai doesn't intend this, intention doesn't erase impact. When the environment rewards the worst version of someone, that's the version that survives. And when Kai eventually returns from his break, those consequences don't disappear. They're waiting for him. Then there are figures like Tylil and Dez. And I'm not getting into the Tylil and Jordan Pauline situation in this video. That situation is touchy, it involves personal experiences, and it deserves its own space, not a quick drive-by in a larger conversation like this. If you want my full thoughts, I already broke everything down in detail in a separate video on this channel, where I take the time to walk through what was said, what doesn't add up, and why nuance actually matters in conversations like that. This video isn't about rehashing that situation, it's about the pattern we keep seeing around streamer culture as a whole. So with that said, let's get back to the bigger picture. This isn't about turning anyone into a villain, it's about recognizing patterns and understanding impact. When people around you repeatedly create moments that make others uncomfortable, spark backlash, or invite public scrutiny, they become liabilities, whether they mean to or not. And when your platform is bigger than theirs, you absorb the damage. You're the one expected to respond. You're the one whose name trends. You're the one people look to for answers. That kind of pressure adds up. It creates anxiety. It creates hypervigilance. It makes rest impossible because you're always bracing for the next situation. That's not friendship, that's emotional labor. There's also something deeply exhausting about being the good one. The one fans expect to be mature while everyone else gets to be chaotic. The one who has to show growth while others are allowed to stay reckless. The one who never gets to mess up quietly. When you're that person, every break feels earned, but never peaceful, because stepping away doesn't mean the responsibility disappears. It just means it waits. That's how burnout becomes chronic. Whenever this topic comes up, people rush to say the same thing. Kai can't control his friends, and leadership isn't about control, it's about boundaries. It's about deciding who represents you when you're not in the room. It's about understanding who adds stability to your life and who adds friction. It's about recognizing when loyalty to history starts costing you your future. Growth doesn't always mean cutting people off in dramatic ways. Sometimes it just means creating distance. Sometimes it means saying no. Sometimes it means realizing that not everyone who came up with you can come with you forever. That's painful, but it's necessary. Streaming culture makes this harder than it needs to be. The moment a creator slows down or sets boundaries, they're accused of changing, selling out, or abandoning their roots. So people stay trapped in environments that drain them because leaving looks worse than suffering. What makes the situation so complicated is that on paper, Cenat has everything: money, influence, access, love from fans, but none of that protects you from being drained by the wrong environment. That's the lie people don't talk about enough. The idea that once you make it, everything else falls into place, that success automatically brings peace, that money solves pressure. In reality, success often magnifies whatever you're surrounded by. If you're surrounded by stability, success amplifies stability. If you're surrounded by chaos, success amplifies chaos. And when you're the biggest name in the room, you don't just experience that chaos, you absorb it. There's a reason why so many successful people burn out quietly before they ever collapse publicly, because the collapse doesn't come from one big scandal. It comes from 1,000 small drains, having to explain other people's behavior, having your name attached to things you didn't do, having to be the mature one when everyone else gets to be reckless, having to clean up messes you didn't make, emotionally, publicly, psychologically. That weight doesn't show up on stream, but it shows up in exhaustion and irritability and withdrawal, in needing breaks that never quite feel restful. And this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable, not just for Kai, but for anyone watching who's successful, ambitious, or climbing. Because at a certain point, loyalty stops being noble if it's one-sided. There's a difference between growing together and being held back by people who don't feel the consequence the way you do. Some people get to be reckless because they're not the ones carrying the fallout. Some people get to be themselves because they're not the ones whose reputation is always on the line. And when that imbalance goes unaddressed, resentment builds, even if you never say it out loud. What people call switching up is often just self-preservation. What people call forgetting where you came from is often just realizing where you can't stay. Growth doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like choosing peace over access. And that's a hard lesson to learn when your entire brand is built on community. Streaming culture makes this even harder because it romanticizes suffering. It tells creators, grind harder, tolerate more, accept chaos as the price of relevance. But longevity doesn't come from endurance alone, it comes from discernment. From knowing who actually supports your growth versus who benefits from your proximity, from understanding that not everyone who's been with you at the beginning is meant to be with you at your healthiest. This isn't a call for Cenat to exile anyone. It's not a demand for public breakups or messy fallouts. It's something much quieter and much harder. It's a call for boundaries, for protecting mental health before it becomes a headline, for choosing environments that allow rest to actually be restorative, for understanding that peace is not a betrayal of your past. Because here's the truth nobody prepares you for. You can love people and still need distance from them. You can be grateful and still outgrow environments. You can be successful and still be overwhelmed. And none of that makes you fake, it makes you human. If Kai wants longevity, not just dominance, not just numbers, not just moments, then protecting his mental health has to become non-negotiable. Because the internet will always want more. The algorithm will always demand chaos, and people will always benefit from your access. But at the end of the day, you're the one who has to live with yourself when the camera turns off. And that's where the real cost of keeping the wrong company shows up. Success doesn't ruin people, unprotected success does. And not everyone in your circle is meant to go where your peace is trying to take. At the end of the day, this isn't about hating Cenat. It's not about canceling anyone. And it's definitely not about pretending the internet doesn't play a role in all of this. This is about recognizing patterns before they become consequences, because streaming culture doesn't just reward chaos, it monetizes it. And when money, attention, and influence all point in the same direction, it becomes very easy to confuse success with health. The question isn't whether Kai is responsible for everything his friends do. He's not. The real question is whether anyone, especially someone this influential, can afford to ignore what their environment is doing to them long term. If you made it this far, I appreciate you actually sitting with the uncomfortable parts of this conversation. If you disagree, say why. If you agree, explain what stood out to you. And if you're somewhere in the middle, that's probably the most honest place to be. If you're new here, this channel isn't about dogpiling. It's about looking past the hype and asking better questions. Subscribe if you want more long-form breakdowns like this. Next up, we're talking about billionaires and why money doesn't just change people, it reveals them. I'll see you in the next one.
We've got another record breaker here tonight too, Cenat. This year, as everyone knows, you broke the record for the most expensive haircut and the least educational university. So congratulations to you. Oh, and also, congrats on your new documentary with 50 Cent. That was you, right?
If you all gonna be on the mic, now turn this mic, now turn this shit on. Turn this shit on. If you all gonna be on the mic making jokes, at least let it be funny. If you all gonna be on the mic making jokes, at least let it be funny.
I thought it was.
Have a good night.